Hi everyone, I am your host, Jade Haggard, podcasting from Art Universe Laboratory. Welcome to Artist Solace. Hello again, and thanks for listening to episode 5 of Artist Solace, an interview with Danny Gyure. Danny lives in Greenfield, Indiana, and is currently pursuing a career in writing. He also works full-time as Director of Event Technology for Markey's Rental and Staging here in Indianapolis. We learn about what he is currently doing to pursue his writing career and how he became interested in storytelling. During the first half of the conversation, Danny goes into great detail about his work, his childhood obsession with storytelling, and one in particular novel he has written called Light. That sounds very interesting, which Danny needs to quit sitting on and get published. And did he really say Mr. Cookie Pants? He claims his biggest critic is his wife, Lauren, who helps him tremendously with feedback and useful criticism. And we both agree that it is much more beneficial having a spouse who is honest with you and will tell you when you suck, as opposed to being with someone who thinks that everything you do is amazing. We also talk about his experience with Epiphanies, which then leads us to discussing subjects like mindfulness, spirituality, and the importance of taking on more responsibility in order to find meaning in life. Danny says that accountability, gratitude, and mere participation are important factors that help guide him through his life. Another great part of the episode is when he describes the entire decade of his 20s as a quote-unquote shit show. I had a similar experience and view my 20s the same way, so it was nice to share that moment of mutual hatred during the conversation. So cheers to turning 30, my friend. Also, I do want to take a second to apologize for my voice being a little low. I was experiencing some microphone issues at the time of the recording, and I was adjusting the microphone and thought it sounded good. So most of the conversation towards the end, I'm going to sound a little bit low and maybe like I'm talking into a can. So I want to apologize, but enjoy what you can. Danny sounds great, but I kind of sound a little questionable, so I apologize for that, but I hope you still are able to enjoy the episode, and I hope you're able to get some inspiration and good insight and advice from this dude. He's really fun to talk to, so enjoy. We're here at Art Universe Laboratory. Welcome to Artist Solace. I am interviewing Danny. I actually forgot how to pronounce your name.
Gyure. It happens all the time. Again, even for 5 letters, it is surprisingly problematic.
Danny Gyure. Yep. Danny Gyure. Danny is a writer or author. He prefers to be referred to as a writer currently. But today we're going to talk to him about what his journey has been like pursuing his writing career.
Awesome.
So, Danny, thanks for coming today.
No problem. Thanks for having me in your really cool loft. It's really cool up here. Actually, when I pulled up, I actually wondered if this was where you were recording because I looked up and I saw the lights. I was like, that'd be a really cool place to film a podcast, and it is.
First thing we're going to talk about is what you're doing right now to pursue your writing career.
Awesome. All right. Nothing.
Nothing?
I'm just kidding.
Okay, just leave now.
Yeah. I didn't realize I was supposed to have a subject when I came in. I didn't know I was supposed to be doing stuff. But no, the biggest thing I'm doing right now is back in January, seemingly by chance, I was mindlessly scrolling through Facebook, and you know how they're not reading our private things, but also they really are. Mm-hmm. I got an ad that popped up for a writing competition. It was called the NYC Midnight Writing Competition. I clicked on it just because I was curious, and I guess you could say it was the thing I'd always wanted to participate in, because when I was growing up and I was looking at all these different reality competitions, I'd always think, like, how would a writing one work? You know, something that you can get small snippets of writing that could be done in almost a tournament form, But I just didn't think there would ever be anything like it. And then I discovered this writing competition. And the way it works, it's a 3-tiered system. And the first round, you have 8 days to write a 2,500-word short story. And you're given a situation, a character type, and a genre. There it is. Second round, it's going to be a 2,000-word short story that you only have 3 days to write with completely new topics of the 3. And then the final round, if and when I make it, I'm pretty sure I'm going to make it.
Okay, so you haven't had the final round yet?
No, I'm waiting. The second round is done, and the third round will be 17th and 18th, because the third round is only 1,500 words, and I have a single day to write it based on 3 brand new topics.
How do they time you with that?
You have to submit by a certain time. You get your whatever your 3 are. Your 3, like my first one, my genre was action adventure, and then my situation was a standoff, and my character type was an engineer, right? And so I had 8 days to write a 2,500-word story on that. And basically, they give you those parameters at midnight once it starts, and you have before midnight on the 8th day to submit. And if you don't, you're disqualified.
Oh, I see now.
Yeah. And,
that's the competitive aspect of it then.
Mm-hmm. And to even more competitive, they I think there was about 5,000 people who submitted, and they break those down into heats. There was 75 different heats, and there was double of each heat because there was just so many people. And the way they grade you essentially is that they'll take the top 5 of every heat, and they're who advance on to the second round. Yeah. And it just so happens that my first heat with the action adventure, there was a story called Riding the Steel. It was actually one of the ones I sent you. I actually beat my heat. I got number 1 of my heat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the second round, it's going to be the top 3 of each heat. And the story I turned in, like I had a lot of readers on it, and I'm feeling pretty good about this one. And like I'm of the mindset where, because this is the first competition I've ever submitted for it. And I've been submitting more since then because now I'm addicted to it, because now I'm just like the competition. It's just basically a free reign to write, right? And like I'm of the mindset where because seeing my name next to number 1, that changed me as a writer, because like I never really tested myself, and this was the first time I was just like, all right, let's see what I got, and I aced it. And now it's like, if I see a second number 1 next to my name, I have no doubt I'm going to win this competition. Like I like that fire is lit, because like I know exactly what I would have to do to win this thing. It's just like whether I do or not, but it's good to feel that feeling, because that's going to keep me going from here on out. But yeah.
Okay.
I think I find out the second round standings, because they usually do it like 3 days, 3 or 4 before, so probably around the 13th is when I'll be getting the email.
Mm-hmm. What if you finish last? Have you put yourself in that position yet? Or
surprisingly, no.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I know it sounds so full of myself, but like I feel
Good.
At least with this second story, I at least feel it's honorable mention worthy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't think it'll come in last. I think it will place. Whether it's just an honorable mention or actually in the top 3, that's here to say. But I'm feeling really confident about it. Because my parameters this time, the whole competition seems to be working in my favor. But that's also just the mindset I have towards life, where I have this whole thing where that you choose what you apply significance to. And that's kind of what I'm doing with this competition. Like the first round I got, my biggest influence in life is Indiana Jones. It's like my favorite thing in the world. I actually have a tattoo of him on my arm.
Let me see that.
Yeah. That's Indiana Jones and Ash. Yeah.
This is where I wish we had like video.
But
because you could flex your muscles and be like, look, more Indiana Jones.
But yeah, he's been my biggest influence. He's my favorite thing in the world. And so when I got my parameters and I saw action adventure, I was like, I can do that with my eyes closed, because I've been studying action adventure. That's like specifically that genre since I was like 8 years old, because that's what Indiana Jones is. Yeah. So as soon as that happened, I was really confident. I didn't think I was going to get number 1. That was a nice surprise, but I got a lot of praise on that short story, which made me feel good, because I kind of bit off more than I could chew when I was writing, because we only had 2,500 words. It's one of those things where, like, if your story is 2,501, you're disqualified. You have to make sure you fit. And I kind of bit off more than I could chew on that one. The story I picked was a little too involved, and I think my story ended up being like 2,900, so I had some significant cutting to do. But yeah, I got it done, and I got number 1. So after I'd written the first story and submitted it, the forum's really cool for this short story competition because after your story's been accepted, then you can post it on this forum and anyone in the competition can read it and you can leave comments and you can leave feedback, all that. And I was looking through the heats for different parameters I thought were interesting, and there was one I came across. It was trophy hunting, sci-fi, and a secret. And I was like, ooh, that kind of sounds familiar. Or, I mean, not familiar, that sounds interesting. That piqued my interest. Mm-hmm. And the first story I picked was a story called The Winds of Venus, just because I liked the title, right? No bullshit. That is one of my favorite short stories I've ever read.
The Winds of Venus.
Yeah. And it was just what this guy wrote for the competition based on this thing, just a 2,500-word story. It's one of the best short stories I've ever read in my life. Mm-hmm. The nuance this guy adds. He went a more dramatic approach, where like he really went for the heartstrings. And it worked. It was a hell of a story. He got third place in his heat, though. I have no idea how. Once the rounds advance, you can't go back and read previous rounds, because I'd be interested to see what those top two stories were, because that story was fucking great. But anyway, after reading that story, I kind of had this epiphany moment where I was like, you know what? That's what I need to do to win. If I'm going to win this competition, I need to go for the heartstrings and actually write about real personal shit. I couldn't really do that in my first one because you have to follow the rules as they give. And action-adventure isn't like that. Action-adventure is Indiana Jones. It's The Mummy. You know, not the shitty 2017 one. The one from 1999
the one with Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, that movie's amazing. That's a perfect example of like
movie, yeah.
That is some of the best action adventure ever. Mm-hmm. But so obviously there's not a lot of room for like deep, heartfelt stuff in there. I would have been breaking the rules. But I went into the second round with that mindset, hoping I could do something like that. And wouldn't you know it, my parameters for the second one, my genre was drama. Perfect. Fast food worker was my archetype, and then closing time, or closing hours. Visiting hours, that's right. It was visiting hours was my second. And I was incredibly excited for that, because I was like, this basically just gave me what I wanted again.
So they just give you, you have those rules, and then you just basically write your own story.
Oh, yeah. I've
never heard anything like that either.
I haven't either.
That does sound interesting.
And apparently they have a lot of contests over the year of like, there's a screenwriting competition that's based around like the same exact way. And there's a flash fiction competition that's the same way. And I actually just signed up for that one. And it's taking place in the summer. It's the same kind of parameters, except it's 1,000-word stories every time, because it's flash fiction. It's basically, how fast and how good you can get at writing short stories, like really short. It's really challenging, but I'm really excited for it, because this competition's got me all hopped up. And pretty much I have this book of short story competitions throughout the year for 2019, and I have every one highlighted by month, and like at the beginning of every month I look, and then I write down like the 4 or 5 that month, and then I submit to them. That's kind of where I'm at now. I decided I was going to put off writing novels. I was going to put off writing pretty much everything except for short stories. I was just going to focus on that this year. And that was a good call, because it's good having directive when you're going into writing, instead of just like, oh, what should I write? I kind of want to do this, kind of want to do that. It's like, no, I'm putting all ideas out of my head except for short stories.
Okay. So you kind of set your own limitations then. Mm-hmm. That's a good idea.
Yeah. I kind of broke my rules a little bit, because behind the short stories, there's also 2 comic miniseries I want to write, like graphic novels. Okay. That's the background thing. I'm always just kind of working on the back of my head, but I always have my current short story that I'm working on.
So those are more like tertiary projects.
Oh, yeah.
As I like to call them.
If I'm ever feeling overwhelmed, because I like to have multiple projects going at the same time in case you ever hit roadblock with one. It's just like, what do I do? Then you just turn over here and go, well, what can I come up with this? And that helps keep the wheels greased.
Yeah.
You never find yourself stuck. But yeah, it's definitely in the back burner, though.
I've heard other artists mention doing stuff like that, so that's a nice similarity too. So you were actively writing novels, because you mentioned that you're taking a break from writing novels.
Yep. Okay. I have. Well, I guess I count it in 2 different categories. Like, I guess what you call regular novels, I have 5 written, or is it 6? I think.
Like 6 completed novels? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been sitting on them for years. Because, I'm sure we'll talk about this, because it's one of the main issues I've had with my writing career, such as it is. But on top of those 6, I also have, I'm writing an ongoing series. It's a fantasy western series called The Travels of Latham Cole. It's the main thing I'm writing at the time. That's actually what I'm putting up on Amazon right now.
I looked that up. because I tried to see if I could look up your name online and if I could find anything. And
Yeah, that's what would come
the
up.
one story that came up.
Yep, that's the main thing I'm putting on Amazon. And because once I found out that you could actually start selling hardback copies of your work through Amazon, that changed my whole attitude towards Amazon. Because, I mean, e-readers are great. I mean, if I could have a story up that someone could just download on their phone, that's pretty awesome. But there's nothing like being able to actually sell people hard copies.
Yeah, I'd rather have a hard copy.
And I actually found a cover artist who I'm going to work with.
Like I printed out like 2 of your stories because I'd rather read them.
See, I do the same thing. I do the exact same thing. And like even when I edit my own stories, like I have to have it printed out that way I could go over and mark it. I like physically mark it because it makes a difference to me. Instead of just reading it back on the screen, I feel like I'm way more critical when I'm actually holding it.
Yeah, I experienced that too.
Yeah.
I can't really explain why either, but it's like...
I think it has to do with the ease. Because like if you're just looking at the Word document, then you could be like, do I really need this paragraph? I mean, it kind of works. Why not? But when you actually see how much real estate that paragraph takes up on a page, you just go, you know what? Nope, read. Just all the way through it.
Or even when you read it out loud. If you read it out loud, it might sound weird. As opposed to like actually reading it on a piece of paper. When you read something out loud, you might want to change something.
Yeah.
So that's
a good point. Yeah, because especially with this writing competition, like me and my wife read it like 5 times back to back. Like I'll read it, then she'll read it, and then I'll read it again.
Like out loud to each other?
Out loud to each other.
That's nice teamwork.
It is.
I like that.
And yeah, she really helped. I mean, she's the only reason why I'm sure I got first on that first seat, because she gave me a lot of good advice. Because I have a couple readers who are like my permanent readers, who I'll send my work and they'll read and give me their thoughts. And yeah. Talk about advice. That's an important thing for any writer to have, is someone that they trust, not to just feed them bullshit like, oh, everything you do is wonderful, I love everything. That's not what you want. You want someone who will give you honest critiques, who will be like, you know what, this isn't working. And I'm lucky that I have like 3 people who actually offer me that. And my biggest critic, I love this, is my wife.
I was going to say,
I absolutely love it.
Your significant other is your biggest critic.
Oh, she is. She, without a doubt, she is. It makes me laugh because when I was growing up and first started writing, my idea of like the ideal partner was always someone who just like loved everything I did. Like she thought I was amazing and like I was a great writer, but no, that would be fucking awful.
You want someone who thinks you suck.
Yeah, exactly. Like I would actually prefer my wife actually thought I kind of sucked than I was actually really good. It keeps you humble that way. And yeah, there are so many times where it helps to have that kind of feedback where like nothing I do impresses her. So because a lot of the stuff I write, it's just not her genre. Like, I write a lot of crazy, supernatural, high fiction shit. Like, I have my more real, dramatic stories, but, like, again, like this series I'm working on is a fantasy western. That is not her bag at all. She doesn't really care about it. But she's very, like, she knows it's important to me, so she'll give me honest critiques of it. But, yeah, I much prefer having someone who'll go, that's not very good. And so I'll be like, you just saved me a whole lot of heartache and embarrassment.
Yes, that is so important you bring that up. That is so important.
Yeah. And a lot of times they won't even, because like she's not a writer at all, but one of my main readers, he's also a writer, and that helps. Like he gives me some of my best feedback. His name's Matt. And like for that short story that I was writing the steal for the first round, I was hurting for, like I had 400 words to cut. And when you're at a story that small, I mean 400 words to 2,500 is, what is that, like 20%? 15% of your entire story that has to go. It's very daunting. But there was this one point where, because it's broken down to sections, it's a very fast-moving short story because I tried to keep it with the action-adventure genre, right? I had this one part where it cuts back to the main character, and he says something like, the Pinkerton never came back, because like he went to check on trouble and he never came back. So it's a whole thing where like he starts getting his guns to get ready to fight off the bandits who have hopped the train. And I had this whole paragraph after that line, the Pinkerton never came back. I can't even remember what it was talking about. It was just basically saying, like, he expected him to come back at this time, blah, 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 just pointless shit. He told me, he was just like, you know what, actually, that is way cooler if you just get rid of all that shit and keep that one line that says the Pinkerton never came back. And I tried it, and immediately once I erased it, I was like, wow. That was really good advice. And not only did it make the story flow better, it made it cooler, but it also cut, I think, like 80 words just by itself in that one paragraph. So it's really good to have opinions that you trust that will give you honest critiques of what works and, more importantly, what doesn't.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing. Because a lot of writing is just in your head. You're just alone with these characters, these situations, these stories for sometimes months on end. Mm-hmm. So you start to almost kind of buy into your own bullshit in a way, where it's just like, no, this is good. This is good because I've been thinking about it for a long time. And then you give it to somebody just like, hey, this isn't that good.
Yeah.
That's an important thing, especially from other writers critiquing your work. That's the really nice thing, because they can pick up on nuance, and writers just like musicians inherently understand what musicians are trying to do, and directors inherently know what directors are doing. It's the same thing for writers. Mm-hmm. So when I give my work to a writer friend, he'll subconsciously know what I'm going for. So he'll actually be able to be like, this paragraph actually doesn't make sense because what you're trying to go to like 2 pages later. Like, he understands like the actual inner workings, the nitty gritty of writing. Mm-hmm. That's why it's really beneficial to, like, I've actually never done a writer's group, like where you get together once a week and bring in like 5 pages and kind of like actively edit your stuff. I'm sure it works. It works for a lot of writers. I've heard.
But those exist.
Oh yeah, they exist. Yeah. They exist everywhere. Like even my small town, like at the library, I think it's like once every 2 weeks.
50 people.
No, I live in a much bigger town now. I grew up in a town of 300. Yeah, where I am now. Okay. Yeah, they even have a small one at the local library. So, I mean, you can find them everywhere. And I'm sure, like, a city like Indianapolis has a shit ton. You know what I mean? It's just, like, reaching out and finding them. I've never used that resource, but I have no doubt that it'd be beneficial. And I guess the reason I never really seemed to need it is because I already had that group of, like, 3 or 4 people whose opinions I already trusted. Yeah. So I would just reach out to them.
So when did you first realize that you wanted to be a writer, or that you liked writing?
14 when I decided I wanted to write, but... It's really weird how I got into storytelling. That same friend I was telling you that I just mentioned, Matt, I've known him since I was 5 years old, so we've known each other for 25 years. And he has the same sensibilities to storytelling as I do, because he's also a writer. He's really interested in storytelling in any kind of medium. And like, he writes a lot of scripts as well as like prose. But from a young age, we would just create stories together. I don't know how it manifested, but I mean, in every conceivable way possible you can imagine to write a story, like 2 little kids could do, we did. Like at the earliest age, like action figures were the easiest ones. Like even with all of our friends, like we used to play with action figures like they were like these real life dramas. Like we would have character personalities, we would have story arcs, we would have these branching narratives with all these action figures. I mean, we would, like, on a daily basis, we would be creating these new situations, creating different personalities. Like an action figure one day would have a different personality the next. Like that's how crazy involved we got into it. And that extended to everything. Action figures, I had a bunch of Legos. We used to do the same thing. Wrestlers, we were into wrestling when we were kids, so we used to actually get the wrestling action figures. And we would create, like, these huge, like, wrestling rivalries, and, like, we'd actually run it like the WWE would. Like, we would create all these cool narratives of these characters about, like, why they were wrestling each other. And, like, he had his own wrestling federation. I had my own. And, like, we'd stay at each other's houses on the weekends, and like we would actually have these big mingling of like the 2 wrestling companies where like we'd merge our stories and have these great big pay-per-views. I mean, that stuff all the time. We were just constantly creating. And around, I want to say the age like 9 or 10, we took the next step. First thing that we ever did was our own take on Diablo 2. Like the same character types, the same world, the same enemies, but like after a couple weeks it kind of died. And we didn't really know why. Like, we were having fun, but like we just kind of lost interest. And then we realized we didn't like being constrained by that universe. But it was like, wait a minute. What if we could create our own world that we played in? And from there, we created our own fantasy like world, and this whole unique like story. And this thing lasted for months. Months we would play this. We would just act it out either at his house, my house. And when it was over, and time kind of, it could have been just 2 months, but as a kid, that seems like it's so long. But when it was over, like, we had so much fun doing it that we were just like, we should come up with more of these. And we did. For like the next until we were 13, I think, for like 3 years, all we did was like act out stories. Like, if we weren't playing with action figures making stories that way, we were creating our own that we acted out. And when I was 14, I remember this moment forever. I had dabbled in writing a little bit beforehand. Like the first story I ever wrote, was I was thinking 8 or 9, and it was a story about a time me and my dad went fishing. That's all it was. It was called A Fish Delay.
You wrote that story?
I wrote it. It was just like a 3-page double-spaced like ramblings of an 8-year-old. Right? I think I still have it somewhere. Like it's very just facts, just sentences like we did this, we showed up here, this happened. Like it's nothing. But I liked the idea of being able to catalog something that happened. And after I wrote that one for my dad, my second story I ever wrote, I had no fucking idea why. At the time, The Bug's Life was coming out. So this is probably, 1997, 98, when I'm only 8 or 9. I hadn't seen the movie yet, but I'd seen the trailer on TV a lot. And I was really fascinated by whatever this whole thing was. But I severely misinterpreted the plot of that movie. For some reason, I thought it was way more violent than it actually turned out to be. So I wrote my mom this story based on the A Bug's Life trailer I had seen. And it was gruesome. It was just like 4 pages of bugs killing each other because that's like the main scenes they would show in the trailer. And God bless my mom. But
so you don't know if this still exists?
I don't know if I have the Bug's Life story. I have the fish story.
Holy shit, sounds intense.
Yeah. I don't know if I have the Bug's Life story. My mom, she really was a trooper. I mean, I'm sure it was atrocious. She was like, what the fuck? Her? Yeah. Like, this was a gift I made for my mom because I was like, well, if I have one for my dad, I have to have one for my mom. I don't really remember writing anything besides small little, like, pointless short stories until I was 14. 14 was when it really hit me. It was during the summer. Matt was about to go on vacation to Florida or something. So I was basically preparing for like 2 weeks of really like boredom in summer. And I was like, what could I do to entertain myself? Because all my friends were gone. So I was just going to be by my house. And I was sitting outside like looking at a fire because we always had a fire going in my house. It was just the country thing to do. And I was just sitting out there probably like 9:30 at night. And then the idea of that one fantasy thing we had done, at the time I guess it was like 5 years ago, which is like that's a lifetime when you're 14. That's almost half your life. That idea popped into my head, and I was like, I think that was something. It'd be cool if I could actually have that written down. And that story over the next, I want to say 6 years is what I cut my teeth on, like cutting my writing teeth, was basically taking what we did and putting it to the page, refining it as I went, because obviously there was a lot of issues when 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds come up with a story. There's going to be some plot holes. Yeah. But like it was basically me transcribing that to the page that really gave me all my writing, I guess you could say skills. Like that's what I cut my teeth on.
I see.
And it's never going to see the light of day because even I wrote that thing until I was 20. I think 20 was the last time I actually edited it.
Jeez.
Yeah. I worked on it for 6 years, I think. I ended up being split into 2 parts because the story just kept growing and growing, kept changing and changing because it'd do this thing where like I would edit it and 8 months would go by and I remember about it. I'd go back and read it and think it was terrible. So I'd re-edit it so it was better. And I did that constantly. That's another piece of advice I would give writers. Don't over-edit. Edit something once, maybe twice, if you really think it needs it. But don't do it anymore, because if you do it any more than that, you're going to drive yourself crazy. Because that's actually one of my biggest issues why I haven't actively pursued putting myself out there. I just get locked in this loop of editing, re-editing, instead of just like editing it once or twice, like this is what it is, and putting it out there and fixing things that people could point out later, like a publisher or an agent. But that's probably been my biggest hindrance. I just got obsessed with the idea of like making it perfect every single time. A lot of that was fear. Probably back in the day, I would have said it was more akin to like it's my legacy. I have to make sure it's perfect. But no, it was fear. Knowing myself as I do now, I was just freaked out by the idea of people reading and critiquing my work that I didn't know.
Yeah, fear is a good excuse. But you said that don't edit so much until you maybe go to a publishing agency and then they'll have editors that will.
Well, because the main thing, like, make sure it's good. Like, make sure that shit is locked down tight. Like, no, like, very few grammatical errors. Your story is set up how you want it to be. Make it as good as you possibly can in those 2 edits, but then get it out there. I would say grammatically, just make sure grammar, punctuation. Make sure you don't have any glaring plot holes. Like, make it as best as you possibly can without obsessing about it. And then send it out. Because there's no doubt, I mean, your agents are going to have editors. They're going to have their own thoughts. It's like, this part doesn't really work and you can do this. Then, go back and fix it however you need to. Yeah. But you can't get to that point if you just keep running it through the ringer over and over and over again, which has been my biggest issue when it comes to writing. Put it out there. Yep.
for the world.
Which is one of the nice things that writing the Latham Cole series did, which is like the main thing I'm working on right now. It's going to be a 15-book fantasy western series. I'm putting it up on Amazon, so I'll edit it once or twice. I'll get it as good as I possibly can, and then I put it up. It's actually taught me a lot of control and self-restraint, because even now, knowing that it's up there, sometimes I'll go, I should probably go back and look at it again. It's like, no, stop. It's done. It is as good as it's going to be.
It pops up over your shoulder.
Yep. It happens all the time. But yeah, doing that has really helped get that out of my head. Just like putting it up there. Because like a lot of people, it's actually sold pretty well. And I've gotten a lot of good advice and like critiques from people I don't know. That's the important thing. To this day, though, one of my favorite review I've gotten on Amazon, I only have like 14 or 15, but my favorite one is a 1-star review, and because it's very like
I think I saw that. I looked at the reviews
because it's a fantasy western. It's the shit is out there. If you're not into it, you're not into it. And the review, all it says is like, this stuff is way too weird, and that was it. And I was just like, I actually take that as a compliment. That's kind of what I'm going for. Yeah, but I think about that all the time, and it makes me laugh.
I remember that. That's funny.
Because it just makes me...
You take it as a compliment?
I do, because, I mean,
that's cool.
I just find it funny, because I imagine that guy or girl, like, reading this, just going, what the fuck is this?
Being, like, a square.
Or not even, like, again, like, I write about some weird shit in there, because I enjoy writing about weird shit, so, yeah. Yeah,
awesome.
It's funny. I find it hilarious.
Cool, man. So you spent 6 years on that first, like... novel, and then so that age, then you were 20. So
after
at that point, you were obviously out of high school.
Yeah.
Maybe were you in the college at that time, or?
I went to college for like community college for like 6 months, I think. But then quickly after that, I actually moved to California with.
Oh wow.
Well, my then girlfriend, my now wife. Like right after that. I think I actually moved there a month before I turned 20, so that's kind of when I was over there. Yeah, we just picked up and moved to California because her mom was living out there.
Okay.
And yeah, she kind of gave the offer to Lauren, and Lauren was just like, "Hey, can I bring him?" Just because she knew how much I didn't like the small town I grew up in. I was done with Indiana. And it's literally, I mean, it was one of those things where she was just like, hey, my mom actually offered for you to come to California if you want, like, no hesitation. I was like, I'm there. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my friends. I immediately said, I'm going. And then I just filled in everybody afterwards.
Yeah, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Especially at that age when you have an opportunity like that.
It was insane. It was an insane thing to do, but I'm really glad we did it. But yeah, I was dealing with some severe homesickness when I first moved. And
really?
Yeah. And
so you didn't have any friends, or you didn't have any?
I didn't know anybody there except for Lauren. That was
her mom.
Yeah. But even her mom I'd only met twice maybe. Like again, this was a ridiculous thing to do. But hey, my parents were really supportive of it, so what can you that's pretty awesome.
That's good. That's good.
But because I was going to go to Los Angeles Film School, which I ended up doing, but the financial aid process was taking up a lot longer than I thought. So it wasn't. I moved out to California. I lived in Ventura for 6 months, which is about an hour south of LA. And then after that, I actually went and got an apartment in LA. Like 2 days before my school year started, I just like drove out there and finally found a place that was way overpriced, but I needed something, so that's where I ended up living. But in that 6 months, I just felt like I was spinning my wheels. I wasn't going anywhere. So obviously the idea was just like, I should write something, but not that fantasy that I've been working on for 6 years. Like, I want to write something new, and I don't want it to be fantasy. I want it to be like as real world as like possible. And I came up with this, I guess you'd say it's like a near future dystopian type novel. The kind of story that a 20-year-old has no writing at all, because I had no world experience to back up the kind of shit I was talking about. And that I ended up calling it Whispers from the Dirt. And I like a lot about that story, but it needs a lot of work. Like, just knowing what's in it, it's like, oof. I haven't looked at it probably since I was like 23 or 24, just because I know how much work would need to go into it to salvage the good parts. I really do think there are good parts in it, but that's gonna be like half of the book being rewritten. That's not just an edit. That's like changing everything about it. But I might do it one day, because again, I have to change a lot, because this was written in 2008. And a lot of it's based, I think I actually based the story in 2018 or 2019. So, yeah, I would kind of by the way, completely wrong about what happened.
It's the time you go back because it's the year it was based on.
Yeah,
you have
maybe.
to go back.
Yeah, and then from there, my ideas got steadily better, and I got better as a writer as just the more and more I wrote. The other books I wrote, I think the one I wrote after that was, it was a short book. It was only like 70,000 words, which I guess would equate to like a 300-page novel, which I tend to write long. I have Stephen King syndrome where I kind of have diarrhea of the word processor, as Stephen King put it. But this one I kept real short and sweet, and it's kind of a love letter to Calvin and Hobbes. It's called A Buoyance Monster, and it deals with a kid who gets lost in the woods with his favorite stuffed animal, and to him, the stuffed animal's alive. But like throughout the whole story, it's basically a week-long survival story about this kid like coming of age in this crazy situation he's in. But as he's dealing with like the physical problems of living in the environment, he's also dealing with like hidden emotional trauma that also comes up throughout all the ordeals he's going through. And my favorite thing about that book is that the whole time I play with the idea if his stuffed animal, he calls him Mr. Cookie Pants, but his name's Wilbur. I actually have a whole thing where she's like, my name's Wilbur, right? But the whole time I play with the idea that you don't know if he actually is just in the kid's head. I actually played that really well. Like there's some things where it'll go to another character's perspective, and something will kind of happen in the corner of his eye where it's just like, wait a minute. Is he real? But I never explicitly say. Like, as a writer writing it, I know the answer to it, but it's something I'll never say because, like, I want it to be open to interpretation. Yeah, I'm proud of that one. I don't know why, actually, I haven't gone back and edited that one. Like, that one, I think I would just need, like, one good edit, and it wouldn't be that extensive. Like, I'm actually really proud of that one. And then after that is when I think I wrote, so far, what I think is the best thing I ever read or wrote. It's a book called Light. And it's a supernatural fiction, I guess you would call it, where there's no sun. Like, the sun did exist, but for whatever reason, the sun just disappeared. The world is now encased in infinite night. And that one came out better than I even could have hoped for. Like, if there's one that could get me published first, I think that's the one. It's another one's just like, I just need to edit this one more time, and, like, it's good to go. But, yeah, now that I'm talking about it, I don't know why I don't go back and, like, I'm sitting on a pile of work that I don't really get out to, but it's the whole thing.
We all, well, not all of us, but
yeah. That Light actually had probably one of my proudest moments of writing came from when I was writing the story Light, because just a brief synopsis, and like there's a reason why the sun went away. That was actually the hardest thing about writing it, where I was just like, knowing what I do about science, because I'm very passionate about science, there would be drastic ramifications to the world if there was no sun. So I kind of came up with a way that the sun's still there, it's just blocked. But anyway, no one knows about this because it's been like 100 years since the sun went away, right? And one day there's this kid who's obsessed with the sun age, as it's called, like our just current time. And like one night he's like, one day, but you know what I mean. He's at his treehouse, just kind of like looking up. There's no stars, nothing. It's just black everywhere, besides the lights they have. And he sees what he thinks is a shooting star, like shoot across the sky. And he's never seen one before. He's read about them, but he has no idea what it is. And it hits the ground, like it collides with the ground. And he freaks out. He's like, holy shit, a shooting star landed. And in this world, the natural world is very dangerous. Like, in the short time that the sun's been gone, through supernatural means I won't get into, everything is involved extremely quickly and extremely dangerously. So it's not safe to go out on your own. I mean, it's basically, the way I kind of look at it is like Waterworld, but with darkness. And so you have all these different societies that have gotten up. But anyway, so he goes to the shooting star, and it turns out it's a satellite. And when he gets to the satellite, like he sees like there's like old computer screen, and he starts like clicking around, and this recording comes up saying that this was planned to land like however long after the sun went away. It was essentially a contingency plan. And they had to wait this long because otherwise if they did it too soon, then it would have been ruined, right? So the kid, as he's like messing with this thing, the machine like grabs his hand and like sucks him in, and this ink like goes under his skin and essentially like infects like his entire arm. And he finds out that he has like a week to get across what he doesn't know is the country to this one spot, this one machine that'll actually bring the sun back. And that stuff that just shot up into his arm is the fuel, if you will, that'll activate the machine. So essentially this kid becomes like the savior of the entire planet on accident. And it follows him trying to get there with a group of ragtag people. That
sounds intense.
It is intense. And I have a lot of cool moments in there. Like, because I also went kind of like with a horror aspect to it, because I mean you would, because everyone's just living in like fear all the time. And it deals a lot, because the whole theme of it is like, it's called Light because it takes place where it's just a world of darkness, right? But it deals with the light inside you and how, like, if that goes out, then everything goes out. And the main character is named Desmond Tanner. And he's kind of the protector of the little village he's in. And his wife, his son have been killed. Like, he's on his own. Like, he's miserable, depressed. Like, there's barely nothing keeping this guy together. But he really likes Nathan, the kid who gets infected with the stuff. So when the kid has to go do this, otherwise he'll die, he's going to go help. But it's also about, like, the story's about the kid bringing light back to the world, but it's also about light being brought back to Desmond. Like, he's kind of learning how to live again through this crazy ordeal that he's going through. And, that's my favorite thing I've written. Yeah, that's going to be the one, I think.
That sounds like a really good plot, for lack of a better word.
Why did I get... Oh, that's why. One of my best moments of writing is probably one of the ones I'm most proud of. I have no idea how to explain how it happened. In this story, like, there's the two people trying to prevent that from happening, because they have developed basically a very profitable market for themselves off of the way humanity exists. Like, they call themselves the Count and the Countess. They're light barons. They basically rule over like a huge swath of land by sending out people to basically take taxes from people. It's kind of like feudal, like medieval times, just with darkness. So these two are kind of the main bad, I guess you would say, but the main focus of, I guess you'd say, the antagonist is a man. He's their number one guy leading their forces. And I had no idea who that character was. I knew he was going to be important because the Count and the Countess are doing their own shit their whole time. They're just the ones, they're the pencil pushers, essentially. They're the ones saying, go get him. But this guy was the main antagonist who's doing all the work. He was the one you're going to spend time with. I had no idea what his character was going to be. I knew nothing. Are you all right?
I thought I burped.
Oh, no, I didn't hear it.
No, I did burp, but I didn't know if it was going to be on the mic or not.
Oh, now it's on the mic. But I didn't know what to do with this character. I had no idea who he was. And I was so excited to write, because I was just feeling the story, that I just started without thinking of it. And I was like, I'll come up with it later. And when you're writing, you kind of have an idea of when things are going to come up. And as I was getting farther into the story, I think it was a couple chapters in, I was like, his chapter's coming up, right? The introduction of this character. And I was like, you got fucking nothing. Like, what are you going to do? And the day came where, like, I ended the chapter on the one before that. I stopped for the day. I woke up the next day and I went to write. And I can't explain how it happened. Didn't know anything about this character. I sat down, I opened the Word document, and, like, I titled the chapter. And, like, right when I was about to type, I was like, what am I going to do with this guy? In an instant, I had everything. I have never had a character just fully flesh themselves out in this short a time. And, like, his whole spiel, like, I had this idea of, like, he's going to be nicknamed the Dragon Man because he's all burnt up. Like, he's a mess. He's terrible to look at. He was caught in a fire. And the reason why he's called the Dragon Man was because back in the day, before the Light Barons took over the area, obviously there was pushback from just, like, the normal people trying to live. And it eventually turned up into this all-out war between the Light Barons and just regular people. And that war ended on a mountain, this one specific mountain, where they were fighting. Both forces were mingled together. It was a really bloody fight. And then all of a sudden, someone lit the mountain on fire. They caught the mountain on fire. No one knows how and no one knows why. But whatever person did it, they've burnt, like, everybody alive. And the problem with that in this world is that things have evolved to care about light more than anything else. So a lot of people go light sick, where they are so terrified of the darkness that they kind of lose it. They go insane, and they become, like, I kind of explain it like moth people. They're people who are obsessed with obtaining light no matter what, because that's, like, the most precious thing to people is light. And once you have a lot of light, let's say, like a mountain on fire, you're going to draw all these fucking maniacs from everywhere that can see the mountain. Ooh. And it was a gruesome end to the war. Like, the war ended that day. The Light Barons ended up winning just because they had more people. But after that, like, the war was over, and it was this big mystery about who lights the mountain on fire, and you actually find that out in the book. But, yeah, that was the end of the war. But during that war, the Dragon Man, before he was the Dragon Man, was working for the Countess and the Count, and he was on the mountain when it went up. And rumors started to abound that people who were near him, like, he was rushing into a cave to, like, empty it out. And that's when the fire came in. And they said that there was rumors that people saw him come out and he was on fire, and, like, he yelled at the sky, and since he was on fire, it looked like he was shooting fire. And he just got the nickname the Dragon Man because he somehow survived this gruesome ordeal. All of that literally hit me in 2 seconds. I have never had since then.
Would you maybe call that an epiphany of some sort?
Oh, it no doubt was an epiphany.
Now, were you just, like, writing? Did you just immediately start writing all of this?
Oh, yeah. Because as soon as I had all that information, I knew what his voice was. I knew what his issues were. I knew what his whole overall arc would be. I mean, epiphany is the only word for it, which makes sense because, like, I actually studied recently because consciousness fascinates me. Yeah. I actually read a book on the science of epiphanies, and it makes sense because one of the ways they work is if you're ruminating on an idea for a long time, to completely stop doing it, because your neurons are going to continue firing with that idea in the background. And if you completely forget about the idea and not worry about it, your brain and certain receptors will start giving out alpha waves, and essentially your brain is just waiting for a neuron to fire with a beta wave, and then you get your epiphany. It's very weird how it happens, and that's the only way I could describe how this happened to me. But yeah, that's probably my favorite moment in writing. And it kind of goes with my whole thing of how you choose what you apply significance to. Your brain is firing like that all the time with epiphanies. It's because I study mindfulness. It's kind of how I started to get into, like, the clear consciousness that I have. And one of the things that you learn is that it happens all the time. A lot of times it's negative and it just spirals you down. Like, how many times you've been driving to work and a song will come on and you'll go, this one person who I hated liked this song, and that put me through a really bad time in my life. And you'll literally just start spiraling, and by the time you get to work, you're in a terrible mood and you have no idea why. That's you choosing what you apply significance to. Mm. You could have said, oh yeah, didn't that one asshole like that song? Man, he sucked. And then you just continue on. But you're choosing what you're paying attention to. The thing that I learned from mindfulness is that all your emotions, all your thoughts and feelings are just appearances in consciousness. Like, if I were to say purple elephant, you're going to think of a purple elephant pretty much unwittingly. It's just going to pop in there. That's the same thing that happens when you have negative feelings and negative thoughts. Like, those thoughts of just like, I'll never be good enough. That is just an appearance in your consciousness. And you forget about it as soon as you stop thinking about it. You haven't been thinking about a purple elephant for the past 5 seconds because we're moved on. It's because it just appeared and it went away as soon as you stopped thinking about it. It's the same thing with negative thoughts. I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to become a writer. That's a thought that pops up, and then you just let it go, just like the purple elephant. It seems like it's harder to do, but they're actually the same thing because they're all just things that your brain generates. You're just choosing to latch onto these thoughts over just letting them go.
And you call that, you're studying mindfulness?
Mindfulness, yeah.
That's what you're calling it.
Yeah, I discovered it a couple months ago, actually, when I've been having a lot of changes in the last year. And Sam Harris, I don't know if you know of him. I've
heard him while listening to Dr. Jordan Peterson. And I started to listen to one of their debates, but I haven't finished it. So I'm not as familiar.
Those are
with
good debates
Sam
too.
Harris.
They did the 2-day one where they both go for like 2 hours.
I'm not sure. I've started one. It's still like in a tab on my phone, but I'm familiar with him, but I'm not sure exactly what his paradigm of thinking is.
I'm a huge admirer of his. He's actually done a lot to change my life. Because I actually describe myself kind of like he does. Like, he's a very spiritual person, but he's an atheist. He's a spiritual atheist.
And atheism is just not believing in
right, and not believing in God
or religion or anything.
Well, I think it has to do more with God. Because, I mean, because I believed in God until I was probably 24, I think was the year I stopped. And even then, when I was, like, talking to God every day on walks and stuff, I didn't like religion even back then because it just seemed like the institution of religion has a lot of problems with it. It's not necessarily the religion that people believe in, it's just the institution that enforces it. But when I became an atheist, it was actually me just kind of letting religion go. And it wasn't like a huge ordeal. Like I didn't do it because I was angry at God. I didn't do it because like I felt like I'd been abandoned. It was just actually the comedian Bill Burr. He has a great bit on him going through the same thing, and he was like, me letting go of my religion was kind of like that moment in curling. Where in curling, like the guy's like skating with the big giant like hockey puck. He's got the broom or whatever the fuck. I don't understand curling, but
Is it a movie?
No, it's a sport. Oh. It's a Canadian sport.
I saw a movie.
And curling, like it's an ice sport, so like you're skating along, you're pushing this disc weird thing with a broom, and all of a sudden you just start to notice the disc continuing on while the skater's slowing down, because that's kind of how finessed it is. And then it's kind of like a big shuffleboard, I think, if I understand it correctly, which I probably don't. But he said that's kind of how he was with religion. Like, it wasn't a big thing. It was just he was going. There was just like, you know what? It just kept on going. He stopped, and that's the exact way how it happened with me. And actually, Sam Harris was a big reason for that, because I started getting interested in religion and studying it and reading what different people had to say about it. Yeah, and then it just kind of.
How long have you been listening to Sam Harris? When did you discover him?
It's actually, I kind of had two discoveries of him. I first discovered him as an atheist because he has a couple books like Letter to a Christian Nation and A Faith, which are very good. And they're purely, studies of religion. That's all they're about. So that's how I first knew him. And that was in 2014, maybe 15 when I first discovered him. Okay. And then he kind of faded away a little bit because like you're not always just reading like atheist manifestos and shit, right? But early last year, I discovered that he was into mindfulness. Like, he is a huge proponent of mindfulness. He actually has a podcast app. He has an app called Waking Up, and it's a meditation mindfulness app. It's full of lessons and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. He wrote a book called Waking Up, which is all about mindfulness, and it's kind of like spirituality without religion. And like the way I describe my spirituality, like, because a lot of people, there's a funny meme on the internet that says what people think when I tell them I'm spiritual but not religious, and it's a picture of like a really creepy looking witch doctor. Like, I do get that response a lot. They're just like, what are you talking about? But the way I describe my spirituality is that all the time I feel an overwhelming gratitude for being able to exist in the universe. That is how I define my spirituality. Like, the fact that any of us are here to experience the shit we are is fucking amazing. Because, like, from my perspective, like, we're here by chance. Just through laws of determinism, we just pop up. And then we're here, and then we're gone. We've
survived.
Yeah.
Like, you and I have survived a ton of horrible shit.
And then you think our ancestors did that? Our parents survived that shit. Our grandparents survived that shit. And on and on and on this shit goes.
Women used to bear children without epidurals? How the fuck did that happen? Yeah. That's my joke.
But no, it's true. I mean, you actually brought up a good point. It's like one of my big philosophies. One of my biggest problems with religion is that the way that atheists kind of think is that we are here despite of things. Religious people are here because of something. That changes the way you fundamentally look at life. That's why I think a lot of... I'm going to piss off our religious listeners. But I think the problem, like, a lot of religious people have a religious entitlement, or even if they don't feel entitled, but they believe in God. Let's just use Jesus as an example, just because that's the easy one in Midwestern America. If you believe that you, like, in God, that means that you actually believe that you were put here by God. You don't know what reason that is. You spend your entire life trying to figure it out. But just the fact that you're coming from existence as, I'm here for a reason, kind of makes you think that you're a little bit above the people who don't believe in what you do. Because your God put you here for a reason.
I'm uncomfortable with that saying, I think.
Oh, that...
When people say, we're here for a reason, or this happened for a reason. I've never really liked it.
I don't like it either. Because to me, it just kind of seems like people are trying to find excuses for either the things they've done or the things they haven't done yet.
That's a good one. Let that sink in, audience. Have you ever listened to Alan Watts?
Oh, yeah.
I discovered him last year.
I did too, actually.
When?
Again, like all these big changes happened in August. That's when it started for me. So pretty much August to December is when I was going through like my huge kind of personal development.
Mm. Well, you read Maynard's biography, though.
Mm-hmm.
I could say after reading that, I started looking into sacred geometry. Then I started looking into Drunvalo Melchizedek.
I don't even know what that is.
Well, Maynard talks about it in the biography. He was influenced by Melchizedek back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Melchizedek talks about sacred geometry and stuff.
I think I would remember a name like that.
I know, it's really weird. It took me a long time to really get it down. He has some stuff on YouTube, but I was listening to Melchizedek's stuff on YouTube, just influenced by, like Maynard and Tool and all that stuff. And then I happened to stumble upon Alan Watts. It's like this 20-minute lecture. I don't want to say lecture. It's this 20-minute lecture of him talking about the image. It's when he says an image of God and she is black.
Oh, okay. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I heard that, and for 2 days straight I listened to it. My mouth was just agape the whole time. I was like, holy shit, I had never heard anything like it. He just explained something that just really resonated with me. Then I got on to Jordan Peterson. So that was a really
that's an interesting shift.
Transition. Yeah, from Alan Watts, you can kind of see it as maybe being a little nihilistic about life somewhat. And I used to be really nihilistic. Then I immediately got into Jordan Peterson.
Who's all about empowerment.
Totally. And there's meaning to life and don't be so nihilistic. And it's just life is suffering, but God, just take on more responsibility. And I was like...
Yeah, Jordan Peterson, that's the biggest thing he changed my life with, is that line right there. Because now I find whenever people just I get it a lot because I'm an atheist, what's the meaning of life? And I say pretty much verbatim what he says. It's if you want meaning for life, take on more responsibility for yourself and for other people, and I guarantee you'll never ask that question again. You don't need God to have a purpose in life. Literally, just take on more responsibility for yourself. Mm-hmm. Participate in life, and you will find meaning.
Yes.
The people who are really depressed and have kind of lost it, no matter if you're religious or not, it's because they've stopped engaging with life. I am convinced of that. In whatever way, they have stopped participating. And if there is anything I have learned, life rewards you for participating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And not just success, I mean happiness. I mean finding your true purpose. You get it by participating in life. Whatever way that comes to, whichever way, however that means to you to participate, you will get the most out of that.
Sometimes it's good. I guess you can argue sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but it's better than not doing nothing at all and being stagnant. And
it's better than just waiting for things to happen. Mm-hmm. That's where people get stuck.
Yeah. And it's, as an artist, I don't know if you have a lot, your writer friends, but, being an artist and going to art school, you're surrounded by nihilism all the time. And,
yeah, it's kind of become cool to not care.
I was really nihilistic, especially during my 20s, especially during my early 20s. And now it's I have this new perception of life. It's man, I was really nihilistic back then. Maybe that's why I got really depressed at certain points in my life. And it's just really interesting to think about. Because, artists have this kind of nihilistic attitude. And, of course, I was, soaking up the stigma. And
mm-hmm. You just get swept up in it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you heard the trope a lot where you create your best material if you're miserable. The starving artist stereotype where it's if you're miserable, then you're going to create the best things. That is bullshit. That is bullshit. I have no doubt that you can come up with some pretty great stuff when you're miserable. But you can come up with pretty great stuff when you're happy, too. Sure, you might have some characteristics that are a little more refined when it comes to the area. But are you really going to tell me a little bit of refinement is worth living in misery?
Mm-hmm.
No way. No way. And I used to believe that because the way I describe it, in my early 20s, I was depressed and angry. In my mid-20s, I was depressed and sad. And then in my late 20s, I was just depressed. I actually only overcame my depression, I want to say, like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years. Yeah.
So you would have then. So you say like most of your your 20s.
My entire decade of 20s was a shit show.
That's what
it was entirely a shit show.
Well, there were some fun parts.
Like I was so happy to turn 30. Like it wasn't me.
Me
It wasn't
too.
me getting
Fist
older.
bump.
It was me just going, "Fuck you, 20s."
Yeah, man.
Oh my god,
Yes.
it was awful. Again, it was only awful because I made it awful, which I'm
Sure, yeah,
acutely
you're
aware
right
of
with that.
now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad to leave it
I've
behind.
said that exact same thing to people. Like, I love I'll be 33 this year. Bring it on.
Oh yeah.
I did not enjoy my 20s. Well, I had my children in during my late 20s got better. But I was still like really nihilistic and pretty down, more subject to depression. But holy shit.
Do you ever find yourself, like, with this new attitude and mindset, do you ever find yourself sometimes, not like going back to it, but like putting your mind where it used to be just to kind of remind yourself, like, holy shit, I was like this?
I'm trying to think of anything specific. I mean, I was just talking to my friend today about some addictions I had in my 20s and shit like that.
For like an example,
Reflect on my memories and then...
not necessarily, I guess it's hard to point, but like to real pinpoint what I'm saying. Like there will be times where a situation will happen to me and I react to it the way I do now because I'm me reacting in that moment. But like in the other half of my mind, I'll be acutely aware that not too long ago, I would have acted in a different way. Mm-hmm. A worse way. It's usually always a worse way because that's where I was back then.
Yeah.
But I find that happen to me a lot where someone will say something or I'll do something or I'll mess up. And instead of, like, I'll just continue going on, like, the healthy way I do now, but I'll still catch myself going, if this was 2 years ago, I would be doing this. And it's a nice shock of reality where it goes, like, you've made a lot of progress. This is good.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
It's kind
now that
of,
you
I guess the way to put it is
explain it more.
you're holding yourself accountable. Like, I'm big on accountability, and that's where I think a lot of personal growth comes from. Mm-hmm. It's you actually admitting, like, I did a lot of bad shit back in the day. Like, I made a lot of mistakes. And then accepting it and moving on. I think accountability is probably one of the most important
I
things.
just should have been more organized and disciplined back in the day. And
For mine, I was just
used to-
happier. I needed to be happy. Like, I was so miserable throughout my entire 20s. I'm a big believer in that you're responsible for 90% of your own misery.
Yeah.
It's either rumination or reactivity. You're either stressing out about the past, you're either living in the past or stressing out about the future. And when you do that, you are literally suffering your imagination and your memory. That is all that happens when you get sucked about thinking about the future or the past. You are suffering your imagination and your memory. Because that has nothing to do with the current moment. A lot of mindfulness is about living and appreciating the current moment you are in. And people just get so sucked up into negative emotions based on those two things. Like, I'm not doing enough to make my life there good, or why didn't I do this in the past? Instead of just going, what could I be doing now to improve where I'm at?
Yeah. What could you be doing now?
Because that's all
Right
it's
in front
about.
of you.
Because literally this moment that we're having talking is the only moment we're ever going to have. You know what I mean? Because within an hour, this is going to be in the past. And 2 hours ago, this was in the future. This moment is fleeting. So why not enjoy it as much as you possibly can and then move on to the next moment that you appreciate it as much as you possibly can? Because that's all you're ever going to get.
It's so bizarre to think about that, though. It's so bizarre.
Yeah,
Because
it
the
really
past
is.
and the present, the past and the future aren't even real. They don't even exist right now.
Yep.
It's so bizarre to think about. That makes me think of Alan Watts and some things ideas that he presents.
Yeah, it's...
But then again, you go to Dr. Peterson and it's like, no, you gotta take care of yourself now. And also and take care of yourself in a way that's gonna benefit you in a week or in a month.
Exactly.
Right.
It comes
So
down
it's
to
just like
doing the best you can in the moment, because that's just going to lead to more dividends down the line.
Yeah.
Even if you don't accomplish your goals, if you change your mindset right now to doing as best as you possibly can, you're going to automatically kill half of your own misery. Because if it's rumination reactivity, if you're doing all you can to make yourself happy and succeed, then all those memories are going to start turning into, oh, I was actually doing pretty good then because I was working on this, or I was doing this and I was doing this. You kind of heal that injury of your memory. That was my big one. I've never been a worrier. I've never been a stressor about what's going to happen. But I was obsessed with living in the past. I would actually say I spent like 99% of my time living in the past of every day. And it was very corrosive to my happiness.
So you said when you moved to California, you experienced some homesickness?
Oh, yeah. A lot of homesickness.
Now, do you think that's something that maybe catalyzed, like, depression for you?
Oh, it was definitely a factor. Yeah, and it was just really bad timing where not only did I just move to a place where I didn't have any family or friends, but I had also, before I left, I'd had a bad falling out with all of my closest friends.
Really?
Yeah, just through like a really fucked up situation that got out of control. So even before I moved to California, like that bedrock that my life had been based on was already in pieces. So like I was just floating out there essentially. So yeah, there's no doubt that magnified my own misery. But then I just kept living it over and over.
Damn, son.
Yeah, I was a mess.
The homesickness does intensify it.
Yeah.
Because I was from a small town and I moved up here and I still experienced.
Yeah, that was the crazy. Like, I had a joke I used to tell my classmates where it was just like, moving from where I grew up to L.A., like, I was in the heart of Hollywood. It wasn't a culture shock, it was a culture electric chair. Every day I was just seeing shit I was not experienced with. I mean, I'm glad I did that because it just inundated me with different culture, and I was just like, oh, this is actually really cool. But at the time, it was very frightening. Because, I was only 19, 20 at the time. A very ignorant kid. I mean, extremely ignorant. Like, I just didn't know shit.
Yeah, you should be.
Yeah.
What do you think's been one of your biggest sacrifices?
Time. Like, I enjoy writing a lot, but, like, I can remember a lot of times when I was a kid, like, actively writing in my room or in my basement for a long time, like, while my friends were out playing. Okay. And that kind of magnified to, like, when you take that same thing and extrapolate it to adulthood, like, there are a lot of nights where, like, I'll be having a great time with Lauren, or I'll be playing with my dogs, or I'll want to go, like, my friends be like, I got to get some work done, though. It's sacrificing time. But again, it doesn't really feel like a sacrifice because it's very fulfilling. I enjoy it a lot. But, yeah, like, and the thing is, like, once you get published and, like, the more and more you write, the more and more it starts to become just like a job. Because, like, even when I get published one day, I'm still going to sit down for hours every day to make sure I keep this thing going. Yeah. And, so eventually you'll just be sacrificing time just like your job does. It's just I'll enjoy this job a whole lot more.
Yeah, like sacrificing like time with your friends and family. And that seems to be something that's similar with everyone. Usually when I ask that question, someone will either say, like, I've sacrificed time with my family, or I sacrificed not having kids. Like not having kids, so...
art's a very weird thing when it comes that way, because those are very big sacrifices, because time's all we have. It's like the only resource we can't, refill the bottle with. But also it's a very fulfilling way to sacrifice your time. No matter what your art is. If you're creating something that you really love, like, you're aware of what you're doing with that time, but you enjoy what you're doing. That's the big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say, like, I don't have much of a social life, like, friends that I hang out with. Mm-hmm. I just recently started running with a friend. Oh, nice. It's like I exercise all the time, and it's like I just started running with somebody then. But otherwise, it's like, it's me, George, and the kids, and it's an interesting trying to balance that, all of that, but... Yeah, luckily. Usually if you have a nice significant other, nice as in they can be completely
understanding, yeah.
Sometimes you have to fight about it. Do you have any important advice that you could share with people who are listening, who are maybe considering pursuing either specifically a career in writing or anything artistic? What would be like the most important thing, if you could sum it up?
It's a cliche, but I'll put my own spin on it. Make the art you want to. just again coming from a writing standpoint, since that's what I am, write what would interest you.
Right.
Like if you, again, like me, I'm writing a fantasy western. Not a huge market for that, but it's the funnest thing I've ever written. Like when I get published and people looking back, I think this series is going to be the thing that's most quintessentially me. Like everything that I like as a person and as a creator is going to be in this series. I am literally just writing it to make myself happy. Whether it finds an audience or not, I have no fucking idea. But every time I think about this idea, I just light up and I get extremely excited.
And now is that like an influence from the Indiana Jones that you
no, actually,
previously mentioned, or?
The two big, because my favorite genre is the Western, but the two biggest influences on Latham are, it's like 30% Dark Tower by Stephen King, because I absolutely love The Dark Tower. It's probably one of my favorite pieces of fiction in any media. But 70%, the biggest, it's weird to get to this, is Doctor Who. I have a lot of sensibilities from that show in Latham, just the way that the show's set up and the way he encounters the adventures he goes on. It's sort of like a dark take on Doctor Who almost, because the way that the overarching story of the series is that the gods have left this universe, like they just packed up and vacated, like they're fucking gone. So now there's nothing holding together the laws of existence, I guess you could say. So reality is starting to fall apart on itself, and Latham is existing in this chaos. And so I came up with Latham out of I was so lost. I went through like a 2.5 year period where I call it my black hole period. I didn't write shit. I maybe wrote one or two stories a year, but I had nothing. I was just like, how do I get myself out of this? I think it was actually right when I moved back from California, and I had no answers. I just didn't know what to do. And I was getting frustrated because within like 2.5 years, I had only written maybe 5 or 6 short stories, which is a pretty atrocious turnout. So one day, just stubbornly frustrated, it was very childish. I was just like, I just wish I could write whatever the fuck I wanted. I wish I didn't have to write any rules or pay attention to anything. And I was just one of those epiphany moments. I was like, what would a story like that be? I can't really remember how I got on fantasy Western being, I think probably because I just like Western and fantasy gives you a lot of play when it comes to that stuff. I essentially created Latham so I would give myself a out if I was ever stuck. Where if I was writing and I ever hit a brick wall, in this universe, it basically became like, I don't know what to write here. An earthquake opens up and a T-Rex with rocket launchers for arms comes out. That's a ridiculous example, but I wrote it where that could happen in case I ever got stuck. But the crazy thing is, once I started writing the story, I never got stuck. It just came out very naturally. And I actually just finished the 3rd book because it's going to be 5 trilogies. In each one is going to be based off of one of the Western archetypes. Like there's the outlaw archetype, the gunslinger archetype, the shonen, the sort of like the wandering ronin. The Knight Errant, that's what I'm looking for. The Knight Errant, where it's just like a do-gooder going around. Anyway, every trilogy is going to be based off of each one of these 5 Western archetypes. And each book is going to be written in a different Western style. Like I have ideas for an acid Western. There's, I wrote one that's going to be a horror, one that's a mystery, that kind of thing. I'm keeping it fresh with every new story. But once I started writing, it just kind of came to me. Like I never really got stuck. And I just finished the 3rd book in the first trilogy back in January. And I finally found a cover artist who is really, really good. And I'm having her do all the covers for him because because I was never happy with the first cover of Landlords. The guy who I got to do it was very off-putting. He didn't really do anything I wanted. I'm not happy with that cover at all. But I'm going to have this new artist redo it. And she's been showing me the updates on, she's doing the 2nd one right now. It's fucking great looking. I really lucked out finding this artist. But I'm going to have her redo all 3. And then I'm just going to put all 3 back up at the same time. And then from there on, I'm going to release 1 or 2 every year.
And so that's the thing you want to write about.
Oh, yeah.
And you would argue that you should write what you want, or I've heard it put as in, if you open up a business where you would be the first person in line.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
And I don't know of any other fantasy Westerns, because it probably doesn't interest other people, but it interests me a whole hell of a lot.
And you might find some closet fantasy Western.
Oh, I'm sure.
lovers.
I'm sure it'll get some kind of a fan base, but this will never be the most popular thing I write. I'm very aware of that. But Yeah, I think it's going to be my favorite thing I ever write.
Right on.
Probably won't be my
At least
best.
You have something, like you argue,
Yeah.
like have something as an outlet for what you really want to do.
Exactly.
While you're doing things that maybe other people want to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Gyure.
Hey, there we go.
I got it right. Yay. I'm going to have to cut you off. I'm sorry.
I know. See, I told you. Diarrhea of the word processor. I just go and go and go.
No, it was great. It's really interesting hearing the perspective from a writer. I don't know a lot of writers. I know of one other writer, but otherwise I don't really know of anybody that's actively writing stories currently. So I'm glad to hear your perspective, and I appreciate you coming on.
Awesome.
And thank you for sharing your insight and advice, and like a lot of information about your stories. Sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate having me on here. I actually had a lot of fun. This was really cool.
Yeah. You have to come back again sometime.
Anytime.
Maybe like I want to maybe have people come on maybe like once a year or like every 6 months. I don't know. You're only my 6th interview. So.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Ooh, that puts some like steam in my engines. Like, oh, you got to make some progress before the next one comes. Otherwise, it's just gonna be talking about the same shit.
Yeah, right. There's pressure now. People are gonna know who you are. Ha-ha.
I'm just gonna collapse in on myself now. I'm gonna whirlwind into a depression. No.
Do you have a website or anything?
I'm actually working on a website right now.
Okay.
So right now, the only thing you know is just my Amazon link. And just look up my goofy ass last name, and I'm like the only thing that pops up.
Do you want to spell that out for our listeners?
Yep, Gyure.
All right, people. So you hear his first name, Danny. Is it Daniel?
Oh, my professional writing name is Daniel J. Gyure.
Daniel J. Gyure. Last name?
Gyure.
Gyure. All right, people. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks again, Danny.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening, and I hope you join me on the next episode of Artist Solace. Bye-bye.